What is up, YouTube? This is MWPirate 2009, aka SexyDreamPirate. It's April 8th, so we've officially had, we're going on a month as far as testing with our new set, 6DSi. Now, I have been playing a mono dark deck since 3 Rise, and I've been updating it with every set, so now that I've got some play testing in, I wanted to throw up an update for my Mono Dark Nightmare. Now, before I jump into the profile, my pre-DSi version of Mono Dark was a grindy control type, lot of draw, Black Feather, a lot of discard between Fumes and Ghost Spy, and just it was a grindy control type deck. Now since DSi has dropped, we have these big threatening dragons that I can only banish so many times with Medusa and so on and so forth, and they've got Lux to protect them and all that jazz. So since DSi has dropped, I've modded the deck out, and it's become a lot more aggressive. It generates quite a bit of advantage during the early game, especially using some of the cards that were released in 6DSi. And prior to DSi, it was a Mono Dark Nightmare control, and now it is basically evolved into what I'd like to call a Grave Tempo. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into the deck, and towards the end of the profile, towards the end of the video, I'll go through some of my choices as far as deck construction. Jumping right in, my 1-drops, I'm running 3 Gigabolver, still amazing bait for Medusa. If I have some sort of recursion on board or in my hand, I can drop him and swing for shield early, and that'll give me something for scavenging to pull back, so on and so forth. Still loving Gigabolver, a lot of love. Moving on to my turn 2 drops, I'm running, 3 copies of Scavenging Chimera. It's the Mono Dark Heart of Darkness card, 3,000, pull any creature from your graveyard. Now, originally in my control build, I was running 2 copies, because Heat Seekers was really prominent, Screeching Scaradorable, a lot of people were playing that, and just dropping the turn 2 scavenging without having anything in the graveyard to pull was it was close to a waste of a card. I couldn't really generate any advantage there. But now with some of the new cards, there's a lot of advantage to be gained with a turn 2 scavenging, especially since people have moved away from Heat Seekers and Screeching. Anyways, moving on to my other 2-drop in the deck, 3 copies of Grudge Weaver. Now, originally I was having Grudge Weaver, if you don't know, is a 2 for 1,000 blocker guard, so he can't attack at all, but whenever he dies, your opponent has to discard. Now, originally I was having a lot of trouble deciding between Skeeter Swarmer versus Grudge Weaver, but after some testing, Grudge Weaver just puts in so much work. It's a good chump block, of course. You force them to discard, so that's, you're getting rid of the hand, which is always good. And even with 1,000 power, it still trades with some threats that are being played, as far as Nyx, Blaze Belcher, Rusalka. So there are some cards out there that are still batting around that 1k power range that Grudge Weaver will trade with. So it puts in a lot of work. I'm loving Grudge Weaver. They used to have a card that was basically 2 for 1, same discard on Vanish, and it could attack. But yeah, I am plenty happy with Grudge Weaver. I get a lot of work out of it. Plus, it forces your opponent to really think about, what they're going to do. If they don't have water, Grudge Weaver just throws a monkey wrench in any mana curve plan. Anyways, moving on to my 3-drops, still running 3 copies of Gigastand. Love this guy, puts in so much work. 3 for 2,000, discard on attack. He's good Chimera bait. If I've swung with Scavenging or Bolver on turns 2 or 3, then Gigastand can, surely they're going to have cards in hand. Gigastand can put in a lot of work. He can break quite a few shields without giving away any advantage at all. Most blockers that are being played are chump blockers. Granted, they normally sit around the 3K range, but every now and then you'll come across somebody running Canyon Skimmer or something like that. You know, it's as big as all of the birds, so that's really good. So Gigastand, I get a lot of love for that card. It puts in a lot of work. Moving on, the only other blockers in the deck, I run 2 copies of Scaradorable Gloom Hollow. I don't run 3. I mean, I could, but that'd put the deck up to 41 cards, and I just don't know what I could cut out. And frankly, on turn 3, which this is where I differ from a lot of people, I prefer Gigastand over Gloom Hollow any day. The fact that people are not playing Heat Seekers now just provides so much incentive for me to go in early and start breaking shields without giving away advantage. So that's why I'm running 3 Gigastand compared to the 2 Gloom Hollow. But that's Gloom Hollow and my Grudge Weavers are the only blockers that are in the deck. 5 blockers. It's a really aggressive deck, so I'm not having any issues there. Overall, it's working out really well. Now, moving on to my 4-drop section. I think my 4-drop creatures are really, really interesting. It's a very toolboxy deck, especially whenever it comes to turn 4. And, you know, by that time, I've drawn at least 3 cards. So, you know, it's very toolboxy. It works out really well. Starting off, I run 2 copies of Fumes, 4 for 2,000, discards on summon. Now, originally, whenever DSI first dropped, I was running a 44 card control, I believe, and I was running 3 Fumes, 3 Ghost Spy. So I figured Lux was going to be a huge threat. I swapped the Fumes out completely for Screeching. I left the Ghost Spy, did testing, and ended up putting Fumes back in just because. You know, I made the assumption that people who were running Dragon decks were going to be running a huge amount of draw, and that's not necessarily the case. There's quite a few people that, you know, because they don't have room, you know, they're not running Seneschal, all they're running is Nyx, and if they don't get that turn 2 Nyx followed up by that turn 4 Dragon summon, you know, a Fumes can really throw off their mana curve. And this deck features a lot of removal. I can answer to a lot of their plays, so as they're spending cards to answer my early game aggression, you know, they're depleting their hand, and then before you know it, I can drop a Fumes and put them down to, you know, 1 card, 0 cards, whatever. So Fumes is still putting in a lot of work. It's still a really good card. Now my next 2-drop, 2 copies Screeching Scaradorable. I was running 3 copies just for the Sonic Blast effect. He's 4 for 3 whenever he goes in. Choose a creature. It's level 2 or lower. Banish. If not, it can't block. The can't block doesn't come in too much unless it's late game and I'm trying to get past a Star Lantern or a Grand Gear or whatever. But the level 2 is just, it's a really good answer. It's really good against Rush. It's really good for getting rid of that, it's really good for getting rid of Lux or even Umbra. I've seen some people playing Umbra. It's really good for getting rid of Lux. That's the main purpose that it's in here. And, you know, then I can follow it up with a removal Medusa or something like that on a later turn. I was running 3, and it was just too much. I was summoning up Raw all the time. You know, there's no use to run 3 Screechings whenever most decks are running 3, 4, maybe 5 2-drops tops. So 2 Screeching is more than enough. Now moving on, I'm running 2 copies of Chimera Tyrant, 4 for 6k Double Breaker whenever he wins a battle banishing. Now, whenever this card first released, I wasn't a huge fan, just because all it took was 1 blocker to throw this off. And, you know, then you're just waiting for it to get hit with, Bone Blades or Return to Soil or something like that. But, since, I've tried it out and I've liked it in this build. It's a good answer for Herald of Infernus. It's a good answer to, it bumps with Lyra. It can be summoned if somebody drops an Infernus on the board. It can be cast from the hand. If they do have a blocker, I can follow it up with a turn 5 Black Feather and get some draw off of it when they block. There's just a lot of options with Chimera Tyrant, and in this deck, it's a really aggressive build. By turn 5 with Chimera Tyrant, I've broken at bare minimum 1 shield, more than likely 2 or 3. So, you know, that Chimera Tyrant, they're forced to deal with it. Now, if they have the blocker, then, you know, then I have to answer with a Medusa or a Bone Blades or something along those lines. But if they don't have a blocker, they've got 1 or 2 options. They can get rid of a spell, and, you know, then they're just getting rid of a creature that would have died very quickly anyway, or they can let it attack, break shields, and run something into it, and even if it does that, then Chimera Tyrant has done its job. It's generated some huge advantage as far as ending the game. So that's why I'm running Tyrant. You know, when the card was first released, I wasn't a big fan, but it works really well in this build. Now, moving on to my 5-drop section, I run 2 copies of Black Feather. Yes, still running Black Feather versing Patchwork Surgeon. Since DSI's dropped, since the big dragon decks have come in, there's a lot of Cobalt control variants that are capitalizing on the dragons. There are you know, a lot of fire dragon, like a lot of decks out there that are, you know, featuring the fire dragons as well, but a lot of people have moved away from Heat Seekers. Heat Seekers was the Achilles heel of this deck, and since a lot of people have moved away from Heat Seekers, I can drop the Black Feather on board. I can generate some huge advantage with it, as far as, you know, turn 5 Black Feather. Between Chimera Tyrant, Screeching, and Scavenging, I can swat some decent-sized stuff down. If they've got a blocker on board at that point, they're kind of forced to block because I've broken quite a few shields. So I can generate some huge advantage with Black Feather versus Patchwork Surgeon. Patchwork, it just seemed like every time I drew him, you know, I was like, okay, I can put a body on board and pull one thing, or I can get the mana. And a lot of times I jump for the mana just because one thing isn't quite worth the turn 5 Black Feather over the turn 5 Medusa or turn 5 Giga Stand with a Grudge Weaver or something like that. So that's why I'm doing Black Weaver over Patchwork. Alright, my next 5-drop, 3 copies, Hydra Medusa, 5 for 5, Banish on Summon, Chimera Evo, it's got tons of bait. I mean, what more do I need to say? You can't have Mono Dark without it. You can't, I mean, you can, but it's not real good. You can't really have a really effective Whirlpool tempo without Hydra Medusa. The card still puts in tons of work. The only thing that really stops it now is if somebody drops an Infernus on board and I can't get the bait, or I can't summon a Chimera Tyrant as bait, or I can't pull the bait out of the graveyard somehow and put it on board. But overall, you know, that's my 5-drop section. 5 cards. Works out really well. I did some testing with Ripper Reaper, and I mean, I can't deny that the turn 5 Ripper Reaper, I kill something, or normally it was I kill Grudge Weaver, and they discard, and then they have to kill something. But it just seemed like I don't have the draw power to be giving up cards that easily, and normally Grudge Weaver, you know, I just like having him on board, so because he just discourages so much from people attacking. He throws a monkey wrench in any mana card. So that's, I mean, I did some testing with Ripper Reaper, and it may work for other people, but my particular playstyle, it does not work. So that's why I'm not running him. Yeah. Anyways, moving on to my 6-drops. Now, I have teched in a single copy of Dark Scaradorable. 6 for 6. Double breaker on summon, break a shield. It's a really good card. I can summon him up whenever Infernus is on board. So, I mean, that's always a plus. And the main reason I'm running him is because it's just a good nail in the coffin as far as, you know, they've got 1 shield and a blocker, and I've got 3 things on board. the Dark Scaradorable is just a really good way to put a nail in the coffin and just make sure that there's no way that they're going to be safe. You know, if it's a Storm Spark or a Dragon's Breath, then, you know, they may have held me off for a turn, but, you know, that nail in the coffin play with Dark Scaradorable is really good. Alright, now moving on to my other 6-drop, my only other 2 cards in the deck. I'm still running 2 Tekamora the Wretched, 6 for 11k, double breaker. Whenever he swings, banish your opponent's level 1s. Now, I'm still running 2 Tekamora just because it's so big and it's so early. You know, I can put a speed attacker double breaker on board on turn 6, swings bigger than Bolt Tail, absolutely huge. It can deal with anything that's going to come out, you know, up until turn 9, unless they either Flame Spike or cheat in a dragon earlier somehow, or mana ramping, of course. But I mean, overall, Tekamora is just huge, puts in a lot of work. A lot of people are playing quite a few root traps. I'm not going to say over Terror Pit, but Root Trap has gained a bit of popularity compared to Terror Pit because, you know, people can Dark Return dragons out of the graveyard. So if somebody if somebody Root Traps my Tekamora, then there's no need for me to charge mana again. So, I mean, I normally stabilize around 7 mana and run pretty smoothly from there on. So, 2 Tekamora. I will say that I am considering the only testing that I see, the only possible changes that I see in the future are, you know, until a new deck arises in our DSI meta, the only possible change that I see as of right now is possibly swapping out one of my Tekamoras for a Dracothane, and the reason I haven't is because, as I said, I normally stabilize around 7 mana, and Dracothane is just a little expensive for my taste. But if I get in a grindy control war, you know, I may be doing some testing with Dracothane. Anyways, that's all the creatures. I believe there's 28 in the deck. Moving on to the spells, 3 copies. My favorite card out of DSI, Gloom Tomb. I mean, I love this card. The reason that Scavenging Chimera was not a super popular choice for me during Evo or at least on turn 2, was because there was nothing to pull out of the graveyard. I couldn't generate a hand advantage by summoning on turn 2. I was much better off summoning something else on turn 2. But now, if you can turn 2 Scavenging and then turn 3 Gloom Tomb, you can draw a card and then swing with the Scavenging, drawing yourself another card. Now, there are the rare instances where you'll discard a pile of spells off the top of your deck. Gloom Tomb, if you don't know, you discard 3 cards off the top of your deck and then pull a creature out. Now, there are a few instances, and it's actually happened to me, where I discarded a pile of spells off the top of my deck. That sucks. But the majority of the time, you'll discard at least 2 creatures, possibly even 3. And just discarding 3 creatures off the top is lovely, because you can pull one back, swing with Scavenging, pull another. So basically, you're playing a Darkness deck, and you just logo scan. You've used 1 card, you've drawn 2, and you even got a little bit of choice as far as what you drew, you know, depending on the situation, because you've got some options in your graveyard. So I'm loving Gloom Tomb. Every now and then it'll bite you. I think there was a game I discarded 2 pits and a creature, and then there was another game where I discarded 2 Return from Beyond and Skull Shatter whenever I was doing some testing with Shatter. But most of the time, Gloom Tomb turn 3 is a really strong play, and even later in the game, it's really strong to get back the Medusa or the Black Feather or the Fumes, whatever you need. Alright, moving on, I run 2 copies, Return from Beyond. Drop 4, Shield Blast, pull a creature level 4 or less from the graveyard, and put it in the battle zone. The card is really versatile. It's just another reason why I'm calling this a Grave Toolbox. I love hard casting this for a mid to late game Fumes just to deplete the hand even more. It's a good shield blast just to put, you know, something else on board. You know, if they swing with Herald of Infernus and I don't have a presence on board at all, they break this, I can put a Chimera Tyrant on, then kill their Tyrant next turn. So, or sorry, kill their Herald next turn. So I mean, there's a lot of options with Return from Beyond. I'm really liking it. Moving on to continuing the 4 drops, but moving on. 3 copies of Bone Blades. Tap 4 Shield Blast. Banish target level 4 or less. What more can I say? It's standard. Moving on, I'm running a single copy of Death Smoke, 5 banish target enemy untapped. It's a really good tech. It's one of the few answers that I have that I can cheaply deal with Infernus and, you know, cards such as that. So it works out really well in that sense. I haven't tried it with 2, but I don't really think there's any need to. I did not do any testing with Devouring Smog, but I mean, with the fact that your opponent can choose and it has to be untapped, this card has, or this deck has so much removal. I don't normally have to deal with more than 1 creature on board at a time. So you know, I don't think Devouring Smog would work. But anyways, single Death Smoke is a tech. It's Death Smoke definitely got a bump in playability due to the big, slow Summoning Sickness dragons. Anyways, moving on to the last cards of the deck. 3 copies of Terror Pit, banish anything, tap 7 Shield Blast. Do I need to say more? So the deck is, it's 40 cards, 9, 10, 12, 12 spells to 28 creatures. 8 of the spells are Shield Blasts, so I believe that puts me, you know, my top card, I've got, let's see, my top card, you know, I got a 20% chance of that being a Shield Blast, and then it just increases as I lay shields. So, Shield Blasts, I'm pretty consistent getting at least 1. It's working out really well as far as Shield Blasts go. The deck performs really, really well against Rush. Between Grudge Weaver and the discard of Fumes, it performs really well against Rush. It performs pretty consistently against Blurple. I mean, it's oddly enough, it's a pretty even match between this and Blurple, especially if I've got the early Bone Blades to deal with that turn 3 Neuron. It's a pretty good match against Blurple. I haven't ran it against any Cobalt control. There's no variants of Cobalt in my area. I've ran it against the, you know, some of the Dragon decks that are featuring Manarant versus the Birds, and I will say that it's performing really well there. As long as I'm not swarmed with Birds early game, as long as I have answers to those, it performs really well against the Dragon decks as well. So overall, it's a really solid deck. I played it on the 5th, Friday, at Locals, and went 5-0. I lost 2 games, won all 5 matches. So, I mean, I did really well, and, I mean, the deck's just really solid. It's a really cool deck. It's a lot of fun. And I suggest you go ahead and try it, especially if you're wanting to play something that isn't, you know, mainstream and isn't something that everybody else is running as well. So, you know, that is my Monodark Nightmare Grave Tempo. So, hope you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe. Hopefully I can get some duels up so you guys can see this deck in action. But until then, you guys keep playing.